Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. Today, we're diving into a topic that affects every organization, every shift pattern, and every frontline team, yet remains one of the most overlooked risks in the modern workplace: fatigue. Most of us think of tiredness as an inconvenience, but the science tells a different story. Being awake for long enough can impair you as much as alcohol. It slows reaction times, affects judgment, and erodes situational awareness, often long before someone reaches the point of actually falling asleep. And in high-hazard environments, that degradation can be the difference between a near miss and something far more serious. My guest today is someone who has dedicated his work to making the unseen visible. Dan Wakerley is the founder of Pillar, a company using real-time health and readiness data to help employers get ahead of fatigue, protect their people, and unlock safer and more productive performance. Drawing on insights from physiology, behavioral science, and frontline operations, Dan's mission is to give organizations the tools and intelligence they need to manage fatigue as proactively as any other critical risk. In this conversation, we explore why fatigue is far more predictable and preventable than many believe, what the data is revealing about how work and life patterns interact, and how leaders can start making better decisions long before degradation shows up in an incident report. If you've ever wondered how to turn a hidden human factor into something you can measure, manage, and act on, this episode will open that door for you. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Fantastic. So, thank you everybody for joining us today on this Safety Roundtable session. We're going to be speaking about a topic that is relevant to us all, which is fatigue. And I've got a fantastic guest with me today that I will introduce in a second, or I'll ask him to introduce himself, in fact. Just quickly, as always, these are interactive sessions, so do ask questions. If you're on Zoom with us, raise your hand and we'll ask you to come up and speak and ask questions to Dan. If you're following us either live or after the event, then pop questions in the chat wherever you are, and we will try our best to come back to you and answer, even if you're listening to this well in the future as a podcast, and you think, oh, that's an interesting question I'd love to ask, just do a post on social media, tag Dan and I in, and I'm sure we will we'll come back to you and try and give you the best answer we possibly can. So as I say, we're going to be talking about fatigue and got a really great guest today, Dan Wakerley. Dan, do you want to just start by giving a quick intro to yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Great to see you. My name's Dan Wakerley. So I'm the founder of a business called Pillar. We have a service called Vita, which is helping organizations manage workforce fatigue to help improve safety, but also productivity in workforces and well-being. So that's what we do, with a mixture of technology and advisory services, effectively.
Fantastic. And you shared with me a stat that we used in sort of promoting this, which is about the how being awake for a certain period of time is the equivalent of drinking a few pints. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Fatigue is an impairment about how our bodies function, right? I think that's the key thing, and people often find it a bit difficult. It's a bit abstract, not very tangible to conceptualize that. So we often use this stat, which is actually comes from a pretty seminal paper that one of our advisors wrote, which talks about if you've been awake for about 18 hours, it's about the equivalent of being over the limit from an alcohol perspective. Also, if you've got multiple nights or where you're sleeping 5 to 6 hours a night, that's also at that equivalent level. So, in 1992, it became outlawed in the UK to enter the factory gate with that level of alcohol. But yeah, 3 pints on the head for anybody who's been part of football or rugby socials or that type of thing. Quite an impact.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, what was it, Dan, that kind of opened your eyes to fatigue as a critical and I guess largely invisible risk factor?
Yeah, I personally have experienced this, but also through working in and conversations with many people in safety critical industries. I think we all get fatigued every day, right? To greater or lesser degree. So we all know what fatigue is. I like to do endurance sport outside of work, and it's something that endurance athletes, even amateurs like myself, are always tracking their fatigue, because they know that they get system failure when you get too fatigued in different ways. But also we know from, I did a little bit of time at the start of my career working in Vinci construction, and from other safety critical leaders, we just know that it's something that's a huge issue. You walk around sites and you see people who are not very spatially aware. They look dead on their feet, and it's something that the workforce talk about a lot. It's something that leaders talk about a lot. So at every level, we kind of see this in different ways.
Right. And do people? There's obviously an awareness because, as you say, we've all felt tired, right, at points in time, but yet it does seem to be a big problem. So what's the kind of misunderstanding or the misconception that is causing us to perhaps not deal with this as well as we might?
I think it's a mix of factors. So I think people have been talking about fatigue for 20, 30 years. But why haven't we done anything about it? Well, there's a number of reasons for that. I think, firstly, safety leaders were focused on other things. They were focused on other causes of incidents that were maybe easier to deal with given the technology that was available at that time.
Yep.
Culturally, also, it was we still live in a bit of a hard man culture, but it was even more of a hard man culture a few years ago. So we didn't see humans as fallible human systems. We saw them as robots.
Yeah.
And so you can put the robot through anything and the robot never gives up. But it turns out a human being doesn't work like that. A human being is a biological system. And in certain states, that system mechanically just works less well. But there was not a cultural appreciation for that. So for many reasons, people didn't do anything about it. I think now, certain shifts in culture and also in terms of technology availability allow us to do things much better when it comes to controlling fatigue.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that specifically? I mean that we can measure readiness to work. We can measure if somebody is too fatigued to be safe, through direct markers of physiology. We can measure if a roster is excessively fatiguing. So we can measure these things as we couldn't do before effectively. And we can provide solutions as we couldn't do before. So I think people have been talking about it. I think every safety leader I talk to, they're all just super busy, super driven, trying to do the best thing they can for their people, but they've got finite resources, and so they're like, what can I actually make a difference on? And it's not because people haven't wanted to; they just haven't been able to.
Yeah. I think that's probably the same in many areas, isn't it? As you say, we're all doing our best and we're all trying to achieve the right kinds of outcomes, and it's kind of juggling all those balls or spinning all those plates, whichever analogy you want to use, and just seeing where we can get to. So, in your experience, what sort of patterns do you see in terms of how fatigue contributes to incidents, near misses, or even kind of just errors?
Yeah, so I mean, fatigue obviously it impacts things. Big process safety incidents that are kind of well recorded around the world. We've all heard of, these ones, Exxon Valdez and other things like that. Slips, trips, and falls because fundamentally people aren't as spatially aware, and also, loss of movement coordination, like physical coordination, under fatigue, these types of things. So it happens at all levels. You get people not following the procedure as well, and part of that can be down to fatigue. We don't follow procedures as well. We make double the amount of errors in these types of procedures when we're fatigued. So you see it at all levels in all different environments. And obviously, I can't talk to precisely what we've seen in different clients because that's confidential. But but we see it in construction, we see it in rail, we see it in we see it all types of. We see it in nuclear. We see it all in all types of environments. We see it in mining. From people who are operating on the ground to people operating heavy equipment, they haven't seen someone come into their path. These types of things that can lead to really catastrophic outcomes. You see it in engineers, right? So engineers might make a calculation error that is completely latent. No one will see that for years down the line, that calculation error in a structure. So you see people making all types of errors because of fatigue. You see it in other white collar environments in terms of people's ability to be able to integrate new information, say on a financial trading desk, which I know is not the group of people that we're talking about here. But you see people making errors of all kinds in all environments.
Driving must be another one as well.
People falling asleep. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you see it in rail, right? Where rail workers, some tragic incidents recently where fatigue's been involved, where people not getting out of the way in time, right? People falling asleep at the wheel, all these types of things. But people often think, okay, the fatigue this is not a serious risk unless they've fallen asleep at the wheel. The fact is, way before you fall asleep at the wheel, you've got a real reduction in the amount of things that you can pay attention to as you're driving down the road. All of these other risks around the side. So we've done some work in Saudi Arabia, for example, and it's never the driver's fault. It's always I was driven into, and that might be true, right? Because you don't have perfect data on all these types of things. But it's also true that if you have a real loss of situational and spatial awareness, then it is more likely that you're not going to perceive someone who's driving dangerously in your vicinity, and it's more likely you're not going to take evasive action. So we see it all over the place.
Do you feel as if we've recognized this as more of a strategic risk than kind of a nice to have, like, well-being topic? Or, I mean, how far are we on that journey, do you think, overall?
I think different sectors are in different positions, and different operators within those sectors are in different positions. So in rail, it's very well recognized by lots of different types of stakeholders: operators, regulators, trade unions. All recognize that fatigue is an issue, and they see it as something that's real. That's why we talk about the alcohol thing, and that's why it's great that you said what you said to start this, because it helps make it real. I think in nuclear, because it's an industry where people are so sophisticated in terms of how they look at risk. People have been talking about this for a long time, and also there's been a lot of union discussion in the UK about making sure that workers aren't too fatigued when you have these 24-hour build operations on nuclear sites and things like that. But there are other industries where we're a bit more behind. Mining as well, it's very well recognised. And again, you have different operators, right? So there are certain operators where there are certain individuals there who are very innovative. And I'm talking in general terms. Just I think what I want, the reason I'm talking like this is because I think it's important. The kind of perspective, philosophy I have on this is that every safety leader out there is trying their very best, and they're trying their very best about the things that they understand, the things that they can make a difference on.
Yep.
And some of them are very innovative when it comes to fatigue. Some of them are innovating less when it comes to fatigue, but they're doing great work elsewhere.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
We had a couple of questions come in. I don't know if you saw those.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'm a pro at this, Dan. Don't worry.
Yeah,
I
you're
won't
right.
miss any
Yeah,
questions.
I'll follow your lead. I'll follow your lead. Apologies.
If I do miss any questions, it's because I'm either going to ask them or I think we've already covered the point. But no, I won't miss.
Okay.
There's a question. Yeah, there is a good question here from Steve, which is there a certain pattern that you've seen in fatigue at this time of year? So coming up to winter time, Christmas, and all of that.
Yeah, so you do you do have more problems when it comes to clock changes because it's a circadian rhythm disruption. So you get more accidents, and also alertness does drop when people are when there's less ambient light around. So there are more issues. People do feel more tired, but there's been a real when you get clock change, that's a real disruptor, and that's why you have more road accidents on those days of clock changes. So Clocktober, as one of our clients calls it. I don't know if other people call it Clocktober, but
and even if you just go to to Europe on holiday or something, and you're driving, you can it's that even that hour does feel different, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's another driving related question from Ed here saying he has a 4-hour drive and he normally stops after 2 hours and takes a bit of a power nap for 15 to 20 minutes, which makes him feel refreshed. But he's wondering, is that another problem or is that a good idea, a good strategy?
No. I mean, the best way the best way to overcome fatigue is to sleep. It's the only way, right? Because it reduces sleep pressure. Obviously, people take caffeine, including me, because that kind of blocks the sleep pressure. The blocks the build up, but the best way to do it is by sleep. That's when you clear it out. That will make you more alert. And obviously, what we say to people is try not to have naps too late in the day because that can disrupt the next night's sleep, which will then impair your readiness the next day. But it's always better to take a nap if you need one than to try and optimize for the night ahead. If you're 2 hours in and you're like, I really need to sleep, then have one.
Oh, I wish I could do that. I really I can't manage to do a power nap as much as I can see the benefit, and I feel some days I'd benefit from it for sure. I just can't seem to get to sleep unless I'm properly tired at night time. So perhaps that's something I should keep working on as we go.
Yeah.
So you said that fatigue is both predictable and preventable. What does predictable fatigue look like, and how can organizations anticipate fatigue?
Yeah. So already, and again, it varies by industry. Aviation very much been an early adopter of this. Already, organizations are starting to look at rostering tools, for example, that will help them minimize the chance that people turn up to work fatigued. So they're looking at plotting the amount of work that someone does, the ratio of work to rest, and the timing of all of that, and the change in timing. So going from night shifts to day shifts and this type of stuff. And the best practice there is to use circadian rhythm modeling to inform your rosters, and that can give you some level of prediction of if somebody's likely to turn up to work fatigued or become very fatigued as the shift goes on. So that is a good way to help with prediction, but you can't. Typically, these tools are around 70% accurate. Now it varies a bit, right? I hesitate throwing numbers out because fatigue is also something that's caused by our personal life. So we might be very anxious about something that's going on with work or personal life, and we don't sleep as well, or we don't sleep at all, and that's something that you can't predict from one of those models. So then if you really want to get ahead of a risk each day, you'd use some of these rostering tools that include what's called a biomathematical model, which will help you predict to a certain degree. And then you do a readiness to work check in the morning, which gives you a much greater view, or a much better view of, is an individual likely to be too fatigued on that given day. And you can do that in a number of ways. So if you're looking to predict fatigue risk, you might do it on a multi-day time horizon with one of these biomathematical models, and you complement that with a daily check.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And if I'm talking in the wrong way, by the way, just interject and be like, look, that's not.
I will. So, it all makes sense to me. So hopefully it does to everyone else. But again, if you need any clarification, then feel free to ask, and Dan, I'm sure, will be happy to do that. So this obviously we're speaking today with a safety audience, but I mean, you already mentioned trading floor, where it's a totally different business arena that could be affected by fatigue. So it feels to me like this would sit at the kind of intersection of safety, well-being, HR, and operations, but it can also affect, finance and all sorts of other things. So who typically, or what function typically kind of owns, if that's the right word, this issue of fatigue? And is that the right personal function? Who should own it in your view?
Yeah, you're right. It's cross-functional. The best owner, I think, is a COO. If I were to take my pick, but the COO, because obviously this is something that is about productivity as well as safety, and typically a safety leader may report into a COO. But it's absolutely fine from an organizational perspective if the safety person leads on it, provided a cross-functional approach is taken within the organization. I think that's the key thing. What sometimes I think is not very effective is where people just talk about fatigue from a well-being perspective, and it's seen as a well-being initiative. I kind of think that an organization is missing a lot of opportunity if they see it as that. Because obviously people's well-being is crucial, right? We're human beings. we want to treat each other well, but there's the business case here for people to act is productivity, safety, as well as well-being.
I think that's that is kind of what I was getting at earlier as well. It's sort of moving it away from a nice to have. Or wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have fatigue? Well, actually, that's not enough, is it? It's crucial that we don't have fatigue, and these are the reasons why. And here's the ROI, and here's the justification.
Well, I think it's like, I mean, I don't think I've ever met a business leader who doesn't want to compete more and be better and protect their people more. So it's kind of like this is a great way for you to do that, to be more competitive, to be more effective. Whatever your business goals are, this is a big lever you can pull. And obviously, we want it to happen for all the human reasons, but what enables it to happen in a business environment is the business value.
Spot on. Question here from Nicholas. Do you feel that the diet or type of food that's on offer for someone who works shifts is a contributing factor to causing fatigue issues?
Yes, in a couple of different ways. One, obviously, what we eat and when we eat can affect our rest and the amount of recovery we achieve when we are asleep. Now, how quickly do we get to sleep? What's the quality of that sleep? These types of things. So then that has a direct impact on acute fatigue, so fatigue the next day. And if these are sustained habits, more kind of generalized, longer term fatigue. And then in a second way, which is that sometimes people have the perception of fatigue when actually it may be a blood sugar issue. In terms of, have they been eating stuff which spikes their blood sugar, and then they have a low, they feel lower energy, they feel, some things that go along with that around like motivation and other things, and they might express that as fatigue in terms of how they articulate it. So yeah, absolutely yes.
Yeah. And there's somebody in the chat mentioned about the medical profession. My wife is a corporate lawyer by training, and so there are examples like that where workplaces reward. Certainly in the corporate law sense, it's reward, isn't it? But maybe not in the medical sense. But they reward or they put in place long hours, and maybe that sort of presenteeism sort of starts to drift in. So how can we sort of shift that mindset without being seen as maybe a bit soft or and perhaps that's a bit of an old-fashioned way, but I think that's a way of thinking about it. But I think that's still a reality.
Yeah, I mean, I just say to business leaders, if you care about results, then you act on this lever, because fundamentally, your staff sticking around for a couple of extra hours in the office doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to grow faster, become more profitable, become more safe.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that, and so it's like, and a lot of business leaders, I mean, all business leaders I talk to, they love root cause analysis, right? They're like, what's actually going on here? What are the actual in the machine of my business? What are the actual levers and cogs that are driving more output, but also better outcomes? And so we can then have a very fact-based discussion about the fact that sticking around at night if you don't need to ain't very useful. On so many levels, like excess fatigue, but also psychosocial factors like missing things that are important to you, social things that are important to you, which increases, how much perceived and actual load your body and system is going through in the working environment. These are the types of things that if you optimize those things, it reduces burnout, right? So it's like, look, let's get real about what drives results.
Yeah. And it's a difficult one, isn't it? I suppose, particularly for maybe junior people who are coming into organizations where those long patterns are expected for whatever reason. And there's a psychological safety challenge, isn't there, about, do you feel able to speak up and actually say, this is a problem for me and it's affecting me, and then are people going to listen? So it's probably that maybe is another barrier that's been holding us back.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think when organizations see their competitors doing a better job in this area, then they kind of tend to adopt, because they're like, look, I can't be competitive without doing a different job of this, maybe. I think psychological safety is these things are like a big issue, right? And we talked about a bit of like the hard man culture at the start, and it's like, how do we enable people to signal that maybe they're not okay in a better way? Because often people second guess themselves with fatigue, for example. They're like, am I being a bit weak? Am I letting my team down? When actually, and so they second guess their own subjective appreciation of their own fatigue. And these are problems, right? And so we need to fix those. And that's obviously part of what we're focused on as business. But
yeah. Sham's just said employers could support 12-hour night shift workers by providing a designated quiet space where staff can take a restorative nap during breaks. Canteen rest areas, would be great, but most manufacturing businesses, in her experience, don't seem to allow that. That would seem like a sensible thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, right. I mean, we talked about having a nap and easing the amount of sleep pressure build up, after a night shift, for example, before you drive home. These are things that are going to be helpful. Providing, good nutrition that's going to sustain you in terms of like a sustained level of, but not too high level of, blood sugar, these types of things. That's going to be helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's about, I think it's about working with employers on a case-by-case basis to show them specifically how it can help them. That's some of the conversations that we have with people. We go into the canteen and then we can talk in a very specific manner, because often we talk at a principles level and they're like, okay, I get the principle, but how do I apply the principle?
Yeah. Perfect. Let's move into that then a bit more. Let's talk about, the tech and some of the stuff that you're doing specifically.
Sure.
So you talked a little bit about it already, but your platform's using continuous readiness monitoring. What
Yeah.
exactly does readiness measure, and why would that be a better indicator than simply counting the number of hours that someone slept?
Yeah. So counting the number of hours someone slept can be helpful, but it's not the only thing that is predictive of their fatigue. Obviously, when we think about sleep, we're not just thinking about quantity, but we're also thinking about quality, regularity, and timing.
Yeah.
All of those things are going to help. And this is Matt Walker's framework. I don't know if people have read Why We Sleep, but he's just an amazing sleep scientist that operates out of California, and he has this
Right.
framework of QQRT: quality, quantity, regularity, timing.
Hmm.
So just counting is only one dimension, but also we're not looking at the amount of load that person has undergone before the rest period, right? Because that dictates, the type of recovery profile that they're going to need. So, we think about readiness. When we think about judging someone's readiness to work, we think about direct measures of physiology, so heart
Hmm.
rate variability, resting heart rate. We think about sleep, as we just talked about from that QQRT perspective. We think about subjectively, how do people feel? Because all of these are great kind of data points that can help you understand, is somebody acutely degraded or not? And
Yeah.
part of our product, part of the Vita product, is a measure of those things. It's a 90-second measure that's done upon waking, really.
Yeah.
Pre-shift, whether you're going into a night shift, so you do it in the evening, or a day shift. And so we do that on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Vita can also accept data from wearables.
Hmm.
If you're wearing your wearables overnight, then that can provide really good quality data on how far on what your state is. You want to measure someone's state when it's uninterrupted, when they're not having caffeine, reading news that stresses them out, this type of thing.
Yeah.
So we have a daily readiness to work measure that looks at acute degradation,
Yeah.
and then we're doing some other things now as well around roster optimization, these types of things.
Hmm. Okay.
Uh, yeah, because when you
Um,
think about causes of fatigue, right, 50% of it comes from work, 50% of it comes from personal. So
yeah.
if you want to reduce fatigue, then you want to act on all of those root causes. If you're thinking about fatigue risk, the risk that comes from fatigue, then you might do slightly different things. That's where readiness to work really becomes quite powerful.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're like, look, I know some of my girls and guys out there on the factory floor are fatigued, but I want to manage the risk exposure of people who are very fatigued, and that's not reducing fatigue, but that is reducing fatigue risk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Andrew in the chat has said, thinking about the kind of the fact that it's, some of that's in work and some of it's outside. He's given a scenario of how could a company manage when individuals have, for example, 0 hours contracts, and they might have multiple jobs, and then there's all the other external factors. So I guess, that's one benefit of the monitoring, is that you can sort of at least get a view on some of the things that are maybe not within your control, but you can at least then plug them into your decision making. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's right. And that's why it's much more powerful than monitoring the inputs. You're measuring the result of all of that, like the resulting state of the person, because that's the best proxy. That's the closest proxy for, are they likely to make an error or
Yeah,
have an accident. And look, it's challenging, right? It's challenging in the UK. People working multiple jobs and these types of things, and I think. And in some cases, there have been cases like this in rail, for example, where people don't always declare all of the other jobs that they have been doing.
yeah,
No criticism to those people at all, but the point is when you arrive in a high hazard environment, it's really good if we can identify if you're much more likely to have an accident for your own safety, right? Because you
yeah,
might be doing the second job to pay for something, and pay for your kids' education or something, but it's no use if something happens to you, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In terms of the sort of challenges around gathering data, which is kind of like personal data, shall we say, about an
Yeah.
individual, what do you do to sort of strike that balance between getting the meaningful insight from that data and obviously making sure that that data is being used ethically and also without creating that sense of kind of surveillance? So Matthew in the chat has asked, yeah, what do you get trouble getting team members to engage with all of this and being open to sharing, for example?
Yeah, largely no, actually. And when I say that, I mean that's like right at the start before we've started to engage with workforces.
Yeah,
When you get in what's really helpful is you get in the room with people and you don't just give them some technology. You get in I know what I'm saying is really obvious, but it's always surprising when you get in the room with people and people, you might be talking to some guys who do scaffolding for a living, for example, and you know they might start that conversation where they're like, you know, what's really in it for me here. They might
yeah,
end that conversation really appreciating fatigue, really appreciating how important it is for their own personal safety, and then you start to get a lot more buy-in fundamentally to actually measuring one's readiness to work.
hmm
Obviously, um, you've got to be, it's obviously enshrined in UK law around GDPR,
yeah,
but even just but more importantly, that from a human perspective, you know, you you can't be measuring and taking people's data unless you really need to,
yeah,
and you've got to minimise your usage of that data such that it's congruent with the what you're doing with it, right? The
mhm,
result of that usage. That's obviously one of the core principles of GDPR.
yeah,
Uh, and so that's what we do, right? So we anonymize the data by default. Um, it depends organization to organization. Sometimes it's left to the worker to use this as almost like a self-declaration mechanism.
yeah,
So they'll do a Vita test 90 seconds in the morning. If it says they're fatigued, then the onus is on them to declare, which is already in their employment contract. They're
mhm,
already agreed that that's what they're going to do, and this helps them self-declare. Sometimes a manager will see a very limited amount of data on that individual that it's a person's name who is in the state of fatigue, effectively, so that they can check in with that person and support them. So it really varies, but maximal data privacy
yeah,
and minimal data usage, obviously key.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I imagine in some cases you get um, teams who are, massively aware that this is a problem for them, and they're probably biting your hand off
Hmm.
to get to share because they'd like to find a solution. And whereas, as you say, those scaffolders maybe didn't think it was relevant to them, and and you can uh, uh, educate them and persuade them that it is, and then that's all good as well. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's definitely striking that right balance, isn't it? That's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how would a company, without being too specific, but what sort could you give us a kind of a scenario or a couple of scenarios of where, okay, we've started capturing this data, we've got some insights from it, and then we've made a couple of some concrete changes, and then these are the outcomes that those have achieved, whether that's in safety or it could be in another area.
Hmm. Yeah, so um, on a daily basis, it might be managing the risk exposure of the 1% of individuals who might be too fatigued. Obviously, fatigue doesn't necessarily mean don't work.
Yeah,
It might mean slight role adjustment. Maybe we don't work at height today. These types of things. Um, so that's concretely like how people kind of make changes on a day-to-day basis.
hmm
On a kind of longer term basis, you can use this type of fatigue data to inform operating pattern changes. So core shift hours, practices around commuting, these types of things, where you're able to see if certain working patterns are associated with much higher levels of fatigue, and then you can use that to inform optimizations, and that's the type of work that we've done before with companies, because the people may have no idea. They're often like, look, my roster is compliant with HSE, so I think I'm doing a great job, and I want to do a great job for my people. And then we've demonstrated in certain cases, wow, when they move from this working pattern to this working pattern, there's like an 8-fold increase in incidence of fatigue. This is a big risk. How do we want to manage this? And again, it doesn't mean no solution. What we're looking to do as a company is enable people to be deliberate about something that they were not able to be deliberate about before. Because we all know everybody's got an operation to run, and it's about trading off the different risks. That's what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of sort of technically questions about wrist wearables, and then another one. I'll do the wrist wearables one first. So I think you mentioned about wrist wearables. Matthew says that they're notoriously inaccurate in assessing sleep and fatigue, self-assessment even more so. What sort of validation have you done to show that your insights that you're giving are accurate?
Yeah, so when we talk about this, we need to talk about it at a couple of different levels. It's about how accurate is the core. How accurate is the technology to measure some of the fundamental markers? What I mean by fundamental marker, that might be something like resting heart rate. And then it might be how accurate is that system at measuring something at a higher level, or determining something at a higher level, like which sleep stage are you in?
Right.
And the reality is, because you've got a whole load of calculations and assumptions that happen between layer 1 and layer 2.
Yep.
The wearables are a lot better at layer 1 than they are layer 2. Particularly things around sleep stages and stuff like that. There are some that are getting a lot better, and it's really a difficult exercise to do, right? And it's a huge kudos to all these companies in this space, the wearable companies, people like Aura and others who are making great progress.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that we look at this is that we look at taking the core markers and then interpreting those according to the science, and saying, okay, if we see these types of changes in these baskets of markers moving in these waves relative one to another, these types of things, then we know that that is indicative of a certain thing. And then also, like, you've got to think about signal quality, right?
Mm-hmm.
How good was the signal, and do you have some technology that can help clean that up? You've also got to think about, sometimes wearables get a bit of a bad rap because of how good a job they do during activity. So, I'm a rank amateur runner. If you really want to measure your heart rate while you're going for a run, then use a chest strap. Don't use a wrist worn. But at rest, actually, it's much better for heart rate, this thing. So I guess what I would say is, when you're measuring at rest, a lot of these things from a core marker measurement are a lot better than, and they get bad rep because of during activity. But when you're trying to make a decision about someone's degradation, you want to use validated science to interpret what those markers mean.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And then Andrew has said, would you work with CPAP manufacturers and healthcare providers to incorporate information from those devices into reporting for employers? Obviously, with an opt-in from the person who's using that kind of machine. He's a user of a CPAP machine when he sleeps.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, look, our general principle is the more data, the more data you have on a person, the more reliable your assessment of that person is going to be.
Yeah.
obviously we try and minimize the data that we collect on someone, but if people are happy to opt in and integrate other data streams, then we're always willing to have that conversation, provided we can do something useful with it. So yeah, be very interesting use case to talk about. Matthew, maybe we can connect offline and talk a little bit more about that in detail.
Yeah, perfect. Question here from Mahad, who's watching us on LinkedIn Live. Is there a relationship between fatigue and stress, and is stress a sign of fatigue?
So they're two separate things, but obviously sleep can be a great way to basically clear the system and kind of get over stress and recover from stress. And the more stressed you are in general, the less well you sleep. So they're things which affect each other, but they're not the same thing. But sometimes stress can be a marker of fatigue because we are more emotional when we're fatigued, for example, or we feel the impact of stress, stress coming in upon ourselves more when we are in a state of fatigue.
Yeah, perfect. I've got 3 more questions, and then if there's any more questions, particularly if someone wants to be brave and come and chat to Dan and I on Zoom, then that would be great. What would you say, Dan, is the biggest opportunity here? So if an organization, started taking this more seriously, started tracking the data, started being preventative, rather than being reactive and waiting for something to bad happen, what's the biggest opportunity that an organization could take from mastering fatigue management?
The easiest one is safety.
Yeah.
Safety and errors. We know that, for example, in construction, errors are, about 10 to 20% of operating costs. And we know that when someone is fatigued, they're about 60, 70% more likely to make an error.
Yeah.
So from an economic perspective, error reduction, when we're talking about defects, there's a huge win. Safety, preventing incidents, huge win. And I say that because it's a lot easier to manage fatigue. It's easier to manage fatigue risk than it is to reduce fatigue.
Yes.
But when you reduce fatigue, there are great economic benefits around productivity. And so that's typically something that an organization might do second, because it requires a bit more effort, but the results are bigger. So the ROI is great in both. And in terms of the relative ROI of return on investment, but people usually do it in 2 phases.
Yeah, makes sense. So for everybody that's joined us, what would be one or the key, I guess, belief shift about fatigue that they should take away from this conversation?
Fatigue is real. Once you start recognizing that your body as a system is impaired when it's in a state of fatigue at so many levels, body and brain, once you appreciate that, then you start to see that it's the amount of potential there is in when you manage it and when you reduce it, right? At an individual level, at a team level, we're talking about performance, right? We're talking about productivity, safety, these types of things. When you really recognize that it's real and tangible, then I think you're well on the right path. And then also, I think if I can add a second one,
Go on.
I've got a few, but I'll try and keep it brief. I think the other one that I would say is that, like, actually, fatigue management is not a cost center, right? And it's not something that your workforce are going to revolt against, because it turns out they all are really looking for support in their jobs, and they want to be helped, right? They're often working in very challenging circumstances. They've got personal lives on top of it. They're going to be willing partners for you.
Absolutely.
You're
And
not going to be uphill.
no, go on.
You're not going to be pushing water uphill. With some
Yeah.
some change initiatives that execs run, they're like, it's
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
but it's a 10,000 person org. At
Yeah.
the same, right? You're helping
Yeah.
people with their health, their well-being every day, right? They feel better every day. What could be
Yeah.
better than that?
Yeah. Exactly. And then what would be the key action or actions that people should take away and implement in their business? Let's say we're going to start tomorrow morning, right? What are we going to do?
Start measuring fatigue in a very small way in your organization. Can be 10, 20 people. Start, what you don't measure, you can't manage.
Yeah.
If you really want to get a grip of something, you've got to start measuring it.
Perfect. Well, Dan, thank you so much for that. Learned a lot from the discussion, and hopefully people will go away and think a bit differently about this and start to do some of that measurement that you talked about. What would be the best way to get in touch? And is there anything you wanted to plug? Any sort of articles or webinars or anything like that? The floor is yours.
Yeah, the best way to get in touch with us is via my email, probably, dan@pillar-app.com, PILLAR. And I would just say, this is a huge lever to improve your business performance. So go do it. You'll be really positively surprised.
Good stuff.
And good luck to everyone, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. That's great. And do join us for another safety roundtable in a couple of weeks. 3rd of December, we're going to be talking with the driving forces behind something new and exciting called the Safety Net Foundation. So definitely a good one to join us on. So thanks, Dan, and thank you for joining Dan and I today. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you again on another safety roundtable soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.